Alright, Visual Design Project 1, we're going to take 2 pictures, and I'm going to teach you how to do the 2 pictures. Alright, the goals of the project. Here is why we're doing this. I want you to use a digital camera to learn the basics of photography. I want you to learn image composition, the elements of visual design through photography. So in some ways this is an art class, and we're going to learn how to make things look beautiful, and composition is how to make a photograph look beautiful. We're going to use photo manipulation to investigate the potential of color enhancement and retouching. Basically what that means is we're going to use Photoshop to make a picture look better. We're going to incorporate a variety of image file types into a collage of images. So we're going to work with multiple file types. So you're going to have a JPEG file, you're going to have a Photoshop file, you're going to scan things, and so we're going to use different file types in your collage later on. Okay, so one of the first things we need to do is create a folder for your pictures. Okay, so you need to create a folder V, Creative Computer Apps, 01, Visual Design 2 Photos. So what that means is something like this. Give me a moment here. Okay, so what I've done is I've gone to my computer, so I went Start, My Computer, and you can see I have a folder here with my name on it. I don't know if you're going to have it by now or not. Hopefully you do. If not, we're going to have to do something different. But if you do have a folder with your name, mine has my name on it, B. Miller. Yours should have your name on it. So you're going to go to your folder with your name on it, and you're going to create a folder called Creative Computer Apps. So we're going to go File, New, Folder, and where'd it go? There it is. We're going to call it Creative Computer Apps. Creative Computer Apps. Creative Computer Apps. Alright, so you have that folder, and then what else are we going to do? Alright, so our first unit is Visual Design. So inside that folder, we're going to make a new folder, File, New Folder, and we're going to call this 01. It's the first unit. Visual Design. Alright, and then let's see what else. Alright, so inside the 01 Visual Design, here's our 2 photos. We're going to go in here, we're going to go File, New, Folder, and we're going to call it 2. Okay, so you have to do that. So you should have your personal drive. It should be the V drive, Creative Computer Apps, 01 Visual Design, 2 photos. Okay, that's what it should look like. And this is the folder where you're going to stick your photos after you take them. Okay, so pause the tape and do that. Okay, and then as soon as you get that done, both partners need to do this, by the way. So this is not. So this is an individual activity here as far as making that folder. Okay, all right. Next, naming conventions. If you're going to do stuff, you want to find it. You need to find your work later on. If you're working in a business, your boss needs to find stuff, and your coworkers need to find stuff. So you have to name your files correctly. Other people need to find your work. We just said that. I've had this happen before where I saved something and I gave it the same name, and I copied over something I needed. So I lost work because I named it wrong. Okay, so you don't want to copy over, lose, or have 2 versions of your work. It's confusing. You lose stuff you need. Okay, check this out. This is a file. Okay, so you're going to work with all kinds of files. So let me show you an example. All right, so this is a file. This is a photo. This is a picture that I took. All right, so that's a file. Well, what's it inside? It's inside this folder right here called Project 1. All right, so there is a file. Okay, it's this particular file I'm showing right here. This is a PowerPoint slideshow. How do I know? Well, this image here, the other way I know is that it has this file extension .ppt. Anything that has .ppt will be opened up in PowerPoint. Okay, so files have extensions that tell Windows what app should open the file. So if it says .ppt and you double click on it, it's going to open up in PowerPoint. Don't mess with those unless I tell you to. There's sometimes, every now and then, you need to mess with the extension, but otherwise not. For example, if I took that and changed it to .doc, well, they would think that it was a Microsoft Word document, a word processing document, which it's not, and it would try to open up in Word and it would crash. So that's not good. So don't mess with the file extensions. All right. The next thing is, this is a folder. Okay, files are contained within folders, so it's just a way to organize your work. Otherwise, it'd all be a jumble. So you have folders that contain the files. Okay, files and folders. Good. Naming conventions. All right. When you name a file, so for example back here, I named this number 1 basic elements of composition. That's the name of my PowerPoint slideshow. Well, when I look at that, I know what it is. The number 1 tells me it's the first thing we're going to do in the class. So that's a decent way to name things. Okay. Rule number 1, avoid these special symbols. Okay. They already have specific uses for Windows. A forward, for example, like a / is used to identify a folder. So we looked at that folder. Okay, so for example, if you look right here, a / backward slash indicates that that's a folder. So you don't want to do that sort of thing. It'll confuse the computer. Okay, so rule number 1, when you name stuff, don't put these funny symbols in it. Okay. Rule number 2. Use underscores instead of periods or spaces. Okay, so for example, so a period indicates a file extension. So like we looked at earlier, right here, that dot indicates that file extension is coming next. So you don't want to put a dot randomly in your file names because it'll confuse the computer. Okay, and the other thing is at some point we're going to do web page design, and if you put spaces, it looks funny in the name. So when people look at your web page or file in the web page, it'll have like funny symbols in there if you put spaces. So use underscores instead of spaces. So an underscore, well, let me show you. Well, I'll show you what an underscore looks like. So coming over here, an underscore would be something like this. You put an underscore as one of these symbols right there. Okay, so use that instead of a space. Okay, number 3, keep it short but still describe it well. So your job when you name things is you need to be able to figure out what it is, but you don't want to be too long. Okay, so if it's super long, it's hard to see the whole name. Only part of the name will show up, and sometimes you'll have trouble copying things over. If you have a super long name and you try to back it up, like save it from one drive to a flash drive, it won't work. Okay. Rule number 4. The file name should include all necessary descriptive information so that you can figure out what it is even if you move it to a different folder. So for example, you have this folder called World War I, you have one called Posters, and another folder called Owens, right? And you have 001 TIF. Well, that name, you don't know that it's for Owens, you don't know it's a poster, you don't know anything about it. And if that file somehow got put out of the folder, well, there's no information telling you what that file is. So this person is relying on their folders to tell it what it is. That's not good. Okay, naming conventions. Include a version number. Use a V for version number. So for us, we're going to take a picture and we're going to have 3 versions of it. Okay, so you need to name it. You have to put V1, V2, and V3 so I know which one it is. Okay. Rule number 6, be consistent. So for example, if you say, hey, portrait of Joey by the lake, well, you're starting off with it's a portrait. We'll do that every time. So be consistent with how you name things so you can find it easily. Number 7, use capitals in the file names to make it easy to read. So you can see I use the capitals, even though I didn't have to put underscores because the capitals make it easy to read, and definitely don't put the spaces. That's not a good way to do it. Rule number 8, stay organized with folders that are also named well. So whenever, as you saw when we made our folders, I'm trying to force you guys to stay organized with your folders. Okay, I'm trying to force you guys to stay organized with your folders so I can find stuff and you can find stuff. Okay, and we already talked about it. Leave the file extensions alone. All right, so the .doc, .ppt, .psd, leave the file extensions alone because they tell the computer what to do. So this thing's a PDF, a portable document format. You don't want to mess with that because then the computer won't know what to do with it. Okay, so here's how I want you guys are going to go out in a few minutes and you're going to take pictures. And here's the examples of how I want you to name it. So you're going to take one portrait and one landscape. Okay, so I want you to name it portrait underscore, who is it of? Who's your portrait of? Is Joe by the creek, version 1. This is all the information you need. You can easily figure out what this is. Same thing, you're going to take a landscape, it's a pine tree, it's version 1. All right, I want you to name your pictures like this. All right. Okay, so we're talking about portrait and landscape. So a portrait, this is the portrait perspective. So it's narrow here and it's taller than it is wide, right? A landscape perspective is short this way, long this way. So those are perspective. Typically, by the way, I didn't put it on here. Typically a portrait is of a person, and normally a landscape is of not a person but the land. Okay, so there's kind of 2 different things. There's is it a portrait of a person, and is it the portrait perspective? Portrait versus landscape. Alright, here's a quiz. I want you to answer these questions. Number 1, why is it important to name your files correctly and put them in the correct folder? Number 2, what is the difference between a file and a folder? Number 3, what does the file extension do? Number 4, what is a portrait? Number 5, what is a landscape? Alright, number 6, what is wrong with number 6? Alright, so here we come over here, and here is a folder, and it's called Project 1. Why is that? Why is Project 1 not a good name for this folder? Okay. Okay, number 7. All right, so we're gonna just go through here. We have 13 here, so let's go through that. All right, so number 7. What is wrong with this? This number, by the way, just ignore the number 7 in the name. I put that there to help you answer the question. But so what's wrong with Jack is a bleepity bleep.psd. Number 8. What is wrong with Mr. Period Jack by the tree.psd. Number 9. You can't even see it, so I have to actually click on it for you to see it. What's wrong with Jack by the tree wearing jeans and a t-shirt in spring with the ball cap on his head.psd? What's wrong with that? Number 10. What's wrong with Jack.psd? Number 11. Number 11, you have to look at 2. You have Joe by the Creek Portrait, version 1, and you have Portrait, Joe by the Creek, version 1. What's wrong? There's 2 things wrong with this. Okay, write down 1 or 2 things that's wrong with these. There's something wrong between these 2. Number 12, Jack by the Tree. What's wrong with that? 13, Joe by the Creek Portrait, version 1. Something wrong with that. All right, answer those things. Write them down on your paper, 1 per team. And when you're done with that, okay, now I want you to go to Mr. Miller. I want you to borrow a camera. Remember, you're responsible for it. If you break it, you bought it. I want you to take 1 portrait. Okay, so I wanted a picture of a person. It could be your partner. It could be somebody else. I want you to take 1 portrait. Okay, and I want you to take 1 landscape. Okay, I want you to save them in the correct folder that you just made. And I want you to give them a name that follows the rules. For example, we're going to go back. It should look something like this. Portrait, Joe by the Creek, landscape, pine tree. Okay, we're going to do multiple versions, so people put V1. Okay, so when they go on your computer, you're going to change the name. Let's go back. And, okay, while you're waiting for a camera, you can continue on with the spiel part 2. There's another spiel that talks about stuff. So I haven't really taught you much about taking pictures, but I've taught you how to make names. So the main thing I want you to do is take the pictures, get it in the correct folder, get it named correctly. One needs to be a portrait in portrait perspective of a person. One needs to be a landscape in landscape perspective of landscape. There's a portrait. There's a landscape. Okay, ready, get set, go.